WNBA Finals ratings are in for game number 1.
When are numbers not what the numbers are when you see them? Oh, sure feels like there might be some funny business going on. Is there a little nasty work going on behind the scenes? A little abracadabra bewitched action? Stephanie White knows this one. Yeah, she's conjuring up ratings for the Aces and the Mercury.
The WNBA just walked straight into its biggest PR nightmare. And this time, there's no way to spin it. After proudly boasting about record-breaking finals ratings, the league and ESPN have been caught under heavy fire for what fans are calling fabricated numbers. ESPN claimed the finals opener drew the largest audience in nearly 30 years, declared it a historic moment for women's basketball. But as people began digging into the data, the story started to crumble.
WNBA Finals opener is the most watched since league's inaugural year, I believe, in 1997. That means it took nearly 27 years to get to this point. 27 years to get to this point. So they started out on a high, and it's just been...
It all began with one question. If the finals were such a massive success, why didn't anyone notice? Social media quickly filled with confused fans saying they hadn't heard a single conversation about the game. Not on TV, not on radio, not online. No highlight debates, no viral clips, no trending hashtags. How does a so-called ratings phenomenon vanish from public conversation overnight? The answer, it turned out, had little to do with basketball and everything to do with credibility. Why do you think the WNBA is rigging the ratings? Let us know down in the comments below.
1.9 million viewers with a peak of 2.5 million. ESPN scores most watched game 1 of the WNBA Finals in 28 years, behind only 1997's single game championship format.
When ESPN dropped its press release, the network proudly reported that the WNBA Finals opener averaged 9 million viewers, peaking at 5 million. Headlines erupted, calling it the most watched finals since 1997. It sounded like the kind of turning point the league had been chasing for decades, proof that women's basketball had finally arrived. But the celebration didn't last long. Within hours, media analysts and fans started poking holes in the story.
I saw these ratings and went, my first literal response, oh, that's bullshit. My first response. Literally the first thing out of my mouth was, well, that's bullshit.
First, they noticed something strange. The data came only from ESPN. Usually, Nielsen, the industry standard for TV ratings, releases public reports with detailed breakdowns. But this time, no such report existed. Instead, ESPN cited Nielsen estimates, conveniently locking the raw data behind closed doors. That set off alarm bells. When a broadcaster announces ratings without independent verification, it's like grading your own test and calling it perfect.
Nielsen methodology change. A key factor in 2025 is a change in Nielsen's methodology to include big data plus panel, which incorporates out-of-home viewing, a change that generally results in higher reported viewership for all sports broadcasts compared to previous years. Critics argue that some reported year-over-year growth may be partially attributable to this methodological change, which is not always clearly noted in press releases, of course, not noted in this year's press release.
Then came the fine print, a buried note about methodology updates. This wasn't the same Nielsen system everyone was used to. Earlier in the year, Nielsen rolled out a new measurement model called Big Data Plus Panel. The upgrade expanded what counts as viewership, including people watching in bars, gyms, restaurants, airports, even those who just happened to walk past a screen showing the game. In other words, the WNBA's supposed record audience might have included anyone who glanced at a TV for 10 seconds while ordering fries. That revelation flipped the narrative upside down. The finals didn't necessarily attract millions of passionate fans. They simply counted more bodies. What ESPN labeled as a historic spike was really a technical trick, turning casual glances into full-fledged viewership. The supposed explosion of interest wasn't organic growth. It was data inflation disguised as progress.
I go listen to sports radio. I'm not getting any WNBA finals. I'll turn on ESPN. I'm not getting any WNBA finals. I'll turn on Fox Sports 1. I'm not getting any WNBA finals. Nowhere I look do I see people really discussing the WNBA finals. And ESPN spits out 1.9 million viewers. Are these silent viewers? They very well may be.
Fans immediately started connecting the dots. If this truly was the biggest finals audience since the 90s, why wasn't anyone talking about it? When sports truly break through, the Super Bowl, March Madness, even college bowl games, you can feel it everywhere. Talk shows dissect the highlights. Social media drowns in memes and debates. But this time, crickets. Even ESPN's own shows barely covered their record. No viral clips, no analysis segments, nothing. It felt less like history and more like a cover-up. Then the comparisons rolled in. NASCAR, MLB, and even mid-season football games were generating more discussion online despite having lower viewership numbers. That exposed a contradiction perfectly. If the WNBA really pulled 2 million viewers, where was the cultural impact? Analysts began to suspect that those numbers weren't measuring fans. They were measuring ghosts.
How does it happen when literally nobody is talking about the actual final?
The criticism spread, more details emerged. The official Nielsen data still hadn't been released publicly, leaving ESPN as the only source. And that's when fans realized the conflict of interest. ESPN isn't just a broadcaster. It's a business partner of the WNBA. The league's image directly affects ESPN's bottom line. If the WNBA looks strong, ESPN profits through advertising and sponsorships. The incentive to embellish the numbers couldn't be clearer. Soon, online forums exploded with outrage. Reddit threads and Twitter discussions accused ESPN of manufacturing phantom viewership. Fans mocked the idea of ghost watchers. Millions of invisible fans who supposedly watched the game but left no trace online. Others compare it to Hollywood's box office bin, where inflated metrics sell a success story even when nobody actually bought tickets. A new term started trending in small sports communities: manufactured success.
I'm waiting for the official Nielsen ratings. ESPN likes to do some funny math. You can't find those numbers anywhere else. Every AI lists ESPN as the source, not Nielsen. Last time I checked, ESPN isn't in the ratings business. They're reporting their own ratings. Why did it take so long to put this out? I'm suspicious. Amazing for a game that couldn't even sell out.
By now, ESPN and the WNBA were cornered. The numbers looked great on paper, but the silence around them was deafening. What was meant to be proof of growth had turned into a viral case study and manipulation. Instead of excitement, the league was facing embarrassment. And just as the debate peaked, a deeper revelation hit, one that explained how those ghost fans appeared in the first place. It all traced back to Nielsen's Big Data Plus overhaul. On paper, it was a tech innovation meant to reflect modern viewing habits. In reality, it blurred the line between watching and merely existing near a screen. Bars, gyms, and even airport lounges were now counted as part of the audience. Someone glancing at a muted TV in the background while waiting for a flight could register as a viewer. Multiply that across thousands of locations, and suddenly you have an artificial audience of millions. Critics called it what it was: statistical steroids, a way to make struggling leagues look healthier than they were. One analyst compared it to adding zeros to the scoreboard, a sleight of hand that lets networks brag about record ratings without technically lying. They didn't fabricate numbers outright. They just redefined what a viewer was. The timing also couldn't have been worse. This new system rolled out right before the WNBA finals, conveniently in time for ESPN and league executives to claim a breakthrough moment. Coincidence? Hardly. Insiders admitted the methodology often favors niche sports with smaller fan bases, where even minimal out-of-home traffic can cause massive percentage swings. That meant the WNBA's record might not have come from a surge in interest, just a surge in math. Sports media veterans weren't surprised. They've seen networks spin weak ratings before, but this time felt different because the stakes were so high. The WNBA has spent the past 2 seasons riding the Caitlin Clark wave, and losing that momentum would have been catastrophic. With declining attendance and finals tickets dropping to $6, the league desperately needed a win, or at least the illusion of one. ESPN gave them exactly that. As the story gained traction, fans began comparing this year's finals to the games Caitlin Clark played last season. And that's when the real numbers exposed everything. During Clark's rookie playoff run, her games against the Connecticut Sun averaged 5 million viewers with peaks near 4 million, numbers that were both higher and verified under the old Nielsen system. No inflated algorithms, no bar watchers, no background glances, just millions of fans actively tuning in. That comparison was devastating. It proved the WNBA's current ratings weren't the result of league-wide growth. They were riding Clark's leftover momentum. Her presence alone had generated authentic national attention. Without her, the finals became forgettable. So forgettable that ESPN had to juice the numbers to make them look relevant. The message was clear. The WNBA's biggest audience wasn't watching the league. They were watching Caitlin Clark. And instead of admitting that reality, the league and its partners tried to rewrite it. ESPN's press release didn't credit her for creating the surge in visibility. Instead, it painted the finals as proof of a rising collective brand. But the math told a different story. Clark's playoff games had drawn nearly double the finals' supposed viewership, and that was before Nielsen started counting casual glances as fans. That meant her impact was genuine, measurable, and irreplaceable. Without her, the buzz vanished. Even with inflated numbers, the finals fell hollow, proving that one player's shadow was bigger than the league's entire championship. So, while ESPN bragged about a historic ratings surge, fans weren't fooled. They saw through the spin, the fine print, and the data manipulation. The WNBA's credibility took a hit. ESPN's motives were questioned, and the conversation that followed wasn't about growth. It was about honesty. What was supposed to be the league's proudest moment had turned into its biggest embarrassment. The so-called record didn't celebrate women's basketball. It exposed how far the league and its partners were willing to go to pretend it mattered. And as fans began calling for transparency, one name kept resurfacing. Caitlin Clark, the player whose authenticity and talent had built real numbers, real excitement, and real trust. Fans saw right through it. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Whenever Caitlin Clark was on the court, engagement surged, ticket sales spiked, and broadcasts lit up with energy. The moment she wasn't, silence. The buzz evaporated like it had never existed. Caitlin Clark didn't just elevate her own team. She dragged the entire league into mainstream relevance. She brought new sponsors, new fans, and new credibility that no marketing campaign could ever buy. And yet, instead of celebrating her as a catalyst for their newfound visibility, league executives kept pretending this was organic growth. She was the reason casual sports fans started caring again. She was the reason corporate sponsors opened their wallets. Without her, the WNBA's momentum would have flatlined months ago. And once analysts started tracking the data, the truth was undeniable. The supposed record-breaking season wasn't proof of league-wide progress. It was a desperate attempt to protect a fragile brand built almost entirely around one player. When experts dug through a decade of WNBA viewership, the picture was bleak. From 2015 through 2022, the league's finals ratings were stagnant or declining. In 2019, the championship series averaged just 238,000 viewers, a record low that barely registered on national television. ESPN often buried the games on secondary channels, squeezed between reruns of debate shows and low-tier college matchups. Sponsors began pulling out quietly, realizing that the league's return on investment simply wasn't there. Then, like a switch flipping, everything changed. By 2023, finals viewership jumped to roughly 729,000. A year later, it hit 14 million. And in 2025, ESPN claimed the finals opener soared to 9 million, a 30-year high. To anyone paying attention, that trajectory didn't look organic. It looked engineered. The turning point, Caitlin Clark's arrival. When Clark exploded onto the college scene, she turned Iowa basketball into a national event. Every game was headline material. Crowds packed arenas, broadcasters fought for coverage rights, and fans who had never watched women's basketball suddenly cared. By the time she entered the WNBA, her audience followed her like a loyal army. The Fever's away games sold out nationwide. Regular season ratings skyrocketed, but the moment she was eliminated from the playoffs, the magic faded, and yet ESPN insisted the finals had higher viewership than when she was actually playing. That contradiction didn't sit right. Analysts overlaid WNBA viewership trends with Caitlin Clark's timeline, and the correlation was undeniable. Before her, ratings were flat. After her, they tripled. The finals records being promoted this year weren't the result of collective growth. They were the ghost of Clark's influence being spun into PR gold. The league wanted to prove it could stand on its own, but the data told another story. It was still standing on her shoulders. The 10-year data comparison became impossible to ignore. The WNBA had spent nearly a decade scraping for 500,000 viewers, and suddenly, right after Clark's debut, it tripled its reach. Then, when she wasn't playing, the finals supposedly broke records. The pattern screamed manipulation, and the lack of transparency made it worse. The deeper fans looked, the uglier it got. Online sleuths began dissecting ESPN's wording line by line. They noticed inconsistencies in how the network compared data, mixing averages with peaks, including out OFOM viewers without disclosure, and cherry-picking games to inflate the percentage growth. The so-called 62% year-over-year increase sounded impressive until analysts realized ESPN was comparing select playoff games from the previous year, not full series averages. It wasn't reporting. It was marketing dressed up as math. The backlash was swift. Hashtags like counting ghosts and fake finals ratings trended across social media. Fans, especially longtime supporters, felt betrayed. Instead of transparency, they got spin. Instead of integrity, they got PR manipulation. The outrage wasn't just about inflated numbers. It was about trust. Who exactly was benefiting from this illusion? ESPN, the league office, or both? Even players started hinting at frustration, posting cryptic messages about accountability and transparency. Behind the scenes, relationships between players and league officials grew strained. The more the WNBA and ESPN avoided direct answers, the guiltier they looked. ESPN's business interests are directly tied to the league's success. When the WNBA thrives, ESPN's investment looks visionary. When it stumbles, it becomes a financial liability. So, both sides had the same incentive to project strength, even when the numbers didn't justify it. Behind the scenes, analysts began describing it as a mutual illusion. ESPN needed advertisers to believe in a booming league. The WNBA needed sponsors to believe in its future. Together, they found a way to sell the story, even if it meant bending the truth. The new Nielsen data system became the perfect cover. By counting bar patrons, gym-goers, and airport travelers as viewers, ESPN could claim authenticity while padding the totals. Technically, it wasn't lying. It was just stretching the definition of reality. And it worked, at least at first. Major outlets copied ESPN's headline without verifying it, repeating the record claim until it became accepted truth. But once fans compared the data to previous seasons, the cracks widened. Every outlet that parroted ESPN's numbers suddenly looked complicit in spreading misinformation. The irony couldn't be clearer. In trying to prove that the league had finally arrived, ESPN and Kathy Angel-Berg had instead confirmed that it hadn't. True growth doesn't need exaggeration. It shows up in passion, engagement, and organic buzz. Those things can't be faked, and that's exactly why Caitlin Clark stands out. As the noise faded, one truth remained. Clark was the only part of the WNBA that didn't need manipulation. Her popularity was measurable, authentic, and enduring. Even when she wasn't playing, her presence defined the league's relevance. Her absence from the finals exposed how fragile the league's success truly was. The supposed record viewership wasn't a triumph. It was camouflage for the void she left behind. That's why the record ratings narrative mattered so much. It was the league's lifeline. It was a story that said, we can thrive without her. But the numbers told a harsher truth. They couldn't. Every time analysts compared the finals viewership to Clark's own playoff games, the illusion collapsed. The league's supposed strongest year ever still trailed behind the viewership of a single rookie. This is what analysts now call the Caitlin Clark effect in reverse. When she's on the court, the WNBA looks unstoppable. When she's gone, the mirage fades. Coaches, players, and fans all know it. Some resent it, others accept it, but everyone understands it. Caitlin Clark isn't the league's problem. She's its proof of life. And that's the WNBA's biggest challenge. The league wants to be seen as strong and self-sustaining, but it keeps leaning on a single player stardom to stay relevant. ESPN can inflate ratings and release polished press statements all at once, but the numbers without Clark tell the truth. They're flat, hollow, and lifeless. What the WNBA and ESPN tried to pass off as historic growth ended up exposing the opposite. Their so-called record finals didn't reveal strength. They revealed dependence. Caitlin Clark is the league's past, present, and future. And until they embrace that reality instead of disguising it, every milestone will ring hollow. Because real history isn't made in a press release. It's made when millions of fans care enough to watch. And for now, those fans only show up when Caitlin Clark does. Why do you think the WNBA is rigging the ratings? Let us know down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next.